Initially on the territory of modern Ukraine, there were tribes of Eastern Slavs, the Drevlyans in the north, the Northerners in the northeast, and in the center Polyans. The Drevlyans lived in the right bank Ukraine, in the southwest Tivertsy, and in the west lived Volhynians and White Croats. It is one of these tribes, Polyans, who in 482 will build the future capital of Ukraine, Kiev. Left bank Ukraine was under control of the Khazar Khaganate, a large Turkic state. They kept mentioned Slavic tribes under their control and they paid taxes to them. In the second half of the 9th century, Viking troops of Askold and Dir liberated Poland from the Khazar dependence, but they didn't rule in Kiev for long. In 882, Askold and Dir were killed by Oleg, who captured Kiev and made the city the capital of his state. In 982, Prince Volodymyr Sviatoslavovich baptized all of Russia and introduced a single religion on its territory, Christianity. But the wars between the descendants teared Russia apart. Each prince wanted to get his share. Their lands were decreasing, they had no strength left to resist external enemies' pechenegs. At the beginning of the 13th century, they had to unite in order to defend their land from the Mongols. But in 1214, Kiev was taken by storm and burned by Batu. The most powerful prince at the time was the Galicia-Volyn Prince Daniel Romanovich. But he could not resist the Mongols alone, fleeing from the Mongol dependence in the middle of 15th century. The western part of modern Ukraine passed into the possession of the Polish king, the central part to the Lithuanian princes, and Transcarpathia to Hungary. It was from this moment that the Ukrainian nationality began to form. It was at this time that the territories received the name Ukraine from the Russian word Ukraina, outskirts. By the end of the 15th century, a new social group, Cossacks, had formed on the territory. Gradually, they became a significant military force, no matter how the local resisted. But in 1569, the Lithuanian and Polish Sejm signed the Union of Lublin, laying the foundation for a new large state, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, with its capital in Krakow. In 1654, at the Pereslav Rada, the territory of the left bank Ukraine and Kiev became part of the Russian state. Both were against it, and the Russian-Polish War began, which ended 30 years later with the defeat of Poland. As a result of the Andrusov Peace, Poland recognized territorial acquisitions of Russia. In 1772, the territory of western Ukraine, according to the first partition of Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, became a part of Austria. Right bank Ukraine with Crimea became part of the Russian Empire. Nobles of Ukrainian origin were entrusted with responsible posts. The peasants were allowed to the ruling regimes. Ukrainian identity was preserved only at the expense of the educated stratum of society. The literary language hasn't been lost thanks to the work of Ivan Kotlyrovsky and Taras Shevchenko. In 1861, after the abolition of serfdom of peasants reform or emancipation reform, a large-scale industrialization of country began. Cities began to grow on Ukrainian lands. Railways appeared. Coal and metallurgical industries developed. Agriculture also developed. In July 1914, the First World War began. Ukrainians of the Russian and Austro-Hungarian empires fought against each other. The war dragged on for several years, undermined economy of the state. In 1917, Central Rada took over the administration of the region. Its goal is the creation of Ukrainian autonomy within Russia. When the coming to power of Bolsheviks, the Ukrainian People's Republic was proclaimed, and in 1918 its independence was declared. As a sign of opposition to division of western Ukrainian lands between neighbors, Simon Petlura and Volodymyr Venetchenko announced the creation of the Western Ukrainian People's Republic, or Western Ukrainian Nations Republic. In January 1919, both states were united into a single state, the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. In the spring of 1932, more than 100,000 Ukrainians died of starvation as a result of collectivization. Subsequently, mass repressions began. The struggle against the enemies of the Soviet system led to the defeat of science, the closure and demolition of priceless architectural monuments. Radical groups began to form. The Ukrainian military organization headed by Yevgeny Konovalets, and its own basis the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists appeared, headed by Andrei Melnik. As I said, in 1939, Western Ukrainian became part of the Ukrainian SSR. And in 1940, the Bandera organization headed by Stepan Bandera broke away from that. Before the World War II, he organized the preparation of the armed nationalist underground for an unprecedented and enjoined war with Germany against the USSR. During the World War II, Germans completely occupied Ukraine. The Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists openly demonstrated a benevolent attitude toward soldiers of the Reich. The inhuman treatment of prisoners of war, Jews and Gypsies, led to the creation of partisan troops. In February 1943, the liberation of the territory of Ukraine began, which ended in August 1944. After the end of the war in 1945, Transcarpathia became part of Ukraine. In this war, Ukraine lost more than 14 million people. Cities and villages were destroyed, agriculture was ruined. In 1945, the restoration began. In 1954, Khrushchev handed over the Crimean Peninsula to Ukraine. The welfare of people began to improve. Until the mid-1980s, till oil prices fell, country lived relatively stably. Then economic collapsed. The time has come for a new transformation in the country. The communists tried to rule state for some time, but the Ukrainians were determined to gain independence. On August 24, 1991, Ukraine became an independent country. The coat of arms, flag, anthem, national currency were approved. Leonid Kravchuk became the first president. After the election of new Rada, Kravchuk had to agree to early presidential elections. In 1994, they were won by Leonid Kuchma. His policy of reform and the creation of an open economy led to him being re-elected for a second term. In the 2004 elections, Viktor Yanukovych won by a narrow margin, but as a result of mass protests by supporters of the opposition party on the Maidan, a revolt was scheduled, and then Viktor Yushchenko won. In 2008, Yanukovych became president. His refusal to join the European Union led to a wave of indignation and a new Maidan in 2014. At first everything went peacefully, but when people began to die, and he secretly fled to Russia. An undeclared war began. In the southeast of Ukraine, Donetsk and Luhansk People Republics were proclaimed. In Crimea took place a referendum on joining Russia. After that, new President Petro Poroshenko is carrying out a series of reforms to stabilize the political situation in the country, promising to quickly end the war in the east. But prices and tariffs are rising, the national currency is falling, the military campaign has dragged on. On April 21, 2019, Volodymyr Zelensky began to rule the Ukrainian people, who first of all dissolved the Verkhovna Rada. Parliamentary elections were held in July, and in February 2022, between Russia and Ukraine began military conflict which continues to these days.